This is actually the first pages of an introduction to Gemara workbook that we published at Right Beginnings. I'm the publisher, and the Rabbi Spivak wrote this. Content, questions, and let's get right through it. So I'm not going to read it all, of course. And on the left side over here, look at the cursor. There are translation words. Originally, the Torah was given from Hashem to Moshe Rabbeinu at Mount Sinai, at Har Sinai, and the Torah itself really doesn't give us much in the way of details. If it was, the Torah would be hundreds of times larger than it is. In other words, all of Chumash, think of, let's say, Shabbos. Think of the incredible body of knowledge on Hilchos Shabbos, on the laws of Shabbos. There's only a few psukim, a few verses in the whole Torah that talk about Shabbos. Zachar Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho. Remember the day of Shabbos to make it holy. Shamar es Yom HaShabbos. Sheshis Yom, you should work for 6 days and rest on the 7th day. That's really it. It doesn't talk about cooking and turning lights on and using electricity. So it's cliff notes. The Torah gives, so there originally was set up as this Torah Shebiksav. Torah Ksav is written. Shebiksav, if you did the Chumash book, right, 2 prefixes, that is written down, which was Chumash and Navi, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim, the 5 Megillos, Tehillim. So all of that body of knowledge was committed to parchment, right? It was, and the rest was given. Hashem gave it to Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai. All the various halachos that you look up in Shulchan Aruch or the Rambam, which is who codified Jewish law. But in the Chumash itself, the Torah Shebiksav has very little. Tefillin is pasuk, take tefillin, and it doesn't say which parshiyos are written and what color the straps should be. So Shabbos, almost all of our halachas are like that. So this was handed down from Rebbe to Talmud. There are some more details. I'm not going to go into them now. You can look them up. That little chart here. Again, you have this PDF, so you can look over everything, and you can look over these review questions as well. But there's more detail. There's nuances between halacha l'Moshe Sinai. It's not important for your knowledge right now. All we need to know for now is that there's a body of knowledge that was written down, and there was a body of knowledge that was committed to memory. And some of the commentaries say that this was baked into the cake of Jewish tradition and Jewish life and learning, that we should have to have a Rebbe, that it was a teacher, and that was a part of it, because there's so much nuance and there's so much to learn. But be that as it may, that was done orally. This is lesson 2. Again, please feel free to go over them. I purposely put all of these sheets in the PowerPoint so you can have all of it. So Hashem gave it to Moshe. Moshe gave it to Yehoshua. Yehoshua gave it to Pinchas ben Elazar, the son of HaKohen, and it went on from generation to generation. There is, not for now, but if you're interested, you can do a Google search. There's a list of exactly how it went down through the generations, and all of this was committed to memory. So a Rebbe would sit around with his students and teach them the oral Torah, and they would stay and learn, and when they were ready, he would empower them to go teach others. That's basically how it was done. But you read through our history, we had so much churn and turmoil and destruction and exile. I mean, the fact that we were able to maintain our tradition is just remarkable. Think of all the cultures and nations that disappeared. And I think having the Torah and that Masorah, that tradition, was a big part of it. But what happened was, during the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, they started that tradition started to fray a bit. And you can see in this green paragraph, Shammai and Hillel had many arguments because it may not have gone down to them as precisely as they wanted to, as it could have been, because of people's perhaps memories, weren't perfect. Anytime you transmit something orally, you're going to have some loss, or have differences of opinion. But then what happened when things really started to unravel? Look at this, look where my cursor is. It was during the time of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. Nasi was like the leader, like the titular head of the Jewish people. And he was called Rebbe. We referred to him as Rebbe because he was such a great scholar. And as a term of endearment, he was called a Rebbe. And in order, even though the tradition was not to write oral Torah down, he, quoting a pasuk, I'm even leaving the pasuk out, he quoted a verse that says that sometimes you need to break a law in order to maintain the law. So he said that from now on, we're going to commit the oral Torah, which was only Mishnah, not Gemara yet. It was only Mishnah, would be committed to paper. And they started the process of sitting down and organizing all this information. And, I guess in the vernacular, the best example would be in our PC at home, we have, folders and subfolders, right? So you'll have personal and work, and within personal, you'll have health matters and finances and things that you're writing, pictures of the kids, whatever. So we subdivide those folders to make it easy to retrieve. And so this is the first thing. We're going to spend a little bit of time on this because this is kind of important. Again, you'll have this video, you'll have the PDF, feel free, and you'll have me. So what Rebbe did was he made 6 books, not more than books, like orders, Seder. It's called Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. That's the word Shas comes from that. So Shisha, 6 Sidrei Mishnah, Sidarim of Mishnah. And if you look here on the left side, I hope you can see it. If not, you can review it later. You can look at it later. The categories, the broad categories were Zeraim. Zera means a seed. So all halachas related to planting. Planting crops in Eretz Yisrael required them to give some to the Kohen, give some to the Levi, give some to poor people. So all of those things, anything related to the cycle of working the fields and producing crops would be under Zeraim. Moed is probably the most famous one that goes to holidays like Chol HaMoed. Moed is a Yom Tov. So those are the halachas of Yom Tov and Shabbos. Then you have Nashim, which means women, but it's basically marriage and divorce. All halachas of Gittin, getting a divorce, Kedushin, getting married, Yivamos. So that goes, and then Nezikin is tort law, damages, which also occupies a very, very big part of Gemara learning. And then we have Kachim, which is not that commonly learned because their halachas are challenging, and it really, most of this was only applicable during the time of the Beis HaMikdash. So that's Kachim, things relating to Karbanos, how they're brought, and Taharos, which is the rules of Tumah and Tahara, ritual purity. Okay, so what happened was they had folders and subfolders. So, and I'm going to show you soon how that would work. We're going to find a Mishnah, and I'm going to break it down for you soon. So each Seder, again, there are 6 Sedarim, were divided into Masechtas. So a Masechta it's called typically a tractate, or a book. And the Masechta was broken into prakim, prakim chapters, and each chapter had mishnayos, individual mishnos. A mishnah is singular, Mishnayos is plural. So let's make it real. If we were looking up now, if you wanted to learn some Gemara about Rosh Hashanah this year, you would look for Masechtas Rosh Hashanah, the tractate, the book that has all the Gemara Mishnah about Rosh Hashanah, and you would look in Moed. So the 1 out of 6 categories, it would be in Moed, and then you would look for a volume called Rosh Hashanah. There's a volume called Yuma that we're going to be learning something from soon. Yom means day. The day is the holiest day of the year. Then there's Sukkot and Pesachim. So that's probably the one that's most common that is found in Moed. Okay? So last thing we're going to do before we get started on some learning is to navigate your way around the page of Gemara. So this here is the way a page of Gemara looks. You don't have to memorize this now because you can look it up later. You can refer to it later. But basically the format is this in the middle here. That's the actual text of Mishnah and Gemara. Mishnah is written in very short, few words, and basically stating halachos, rules, or other things like that. And Gemara was written down many years later. It was also committed to paper, and that has discussions around the Mishnah, asking questions, trying to make sure that people had the right tradition from their Rabbeim. As I said, remember, Hillel and Shammai already, things were starting to fray. And you do not need to know this, but just to navigate around the page, on the inside part of the page is Rashi's commentary, where I'm showing you. The preeminent commentator, he wrote Pirush on Chumash, a commentary on Chumash, on Navi, on Gemara. And on the outside over here it's called Tosfos. Mosef means to add. On the outside of the page is Tosfos. That Tosfos means to add. It was an additional commentary, mostly asking questions about the Gemara and very often challenging Rashi on some of his commentary. Parenthetically, the people who wrote Tosfos were called the Balei Tosfos, the people of Tosfos who wrote the additional commentary. Rashi was actually originally referred to as a kuntris, like a pamphlet, because his writings were not originally in the Gemara. So that's just navigating your way around the page. The main Gemara is in the middle. Now, there is no specific format that has to be laid out a certain way. This is just the way it was done. And there were many printings of Gemara. There was a Shas, all of Gemara, all the books of Gemara was printed in a city called Vilna. And people liked the way that format worked. And because a lot of it has to do with retrieving memory and being able to find, we wanted to have the same system of pagination. So virtually everyone started using this format of Vilna Shas. So if you go to any Svarim store or any shul, virtually all of them will have this same format with Rashi in the middle. I'll show you, if you look here on top, in the middle, it says there, I believe it says Perek Rishon. I'll show it to you when we get to an actual Gemara page, but this is just the way to navigate around the page. And the page numbers, there's a lot of information, forgive me. The page numbers are if you ever heard the term a blat Gemara, a blat is 2 sides of a page. So a 2-sided page is referred to as a blat or a daf, and an amud means 1 side. So what it would sound like is, I'm on daf, I'm on page 21, Amud Beis, side 2, and there are 2 dots. I'll show you in a moment how that, in a larger format, how it goes. Okay, so that's basically just going through the history of how Gemara evolved. Again, everything was, Mishnah and Gemara were all transmitted orally. After a while, the people started to forget, and the oral tradition started to fade. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi committed them to paper, wrote them down, and had six orders, 6 siddharim, and we just had those couple of slides ago, right? Zrayim, Moed, Nashim, Nezikin, Kachim, and Taharos. Okay, so this is a page actually from the Gemara, reprinted with Art Scroll's permission. Just if you see, this is Schattenstein edition. He was the donor that underwrote a great deal of this tremendous work. Talmud Bavli, if you want to get more confused, Bavli goes from Bavel, Babylonia, and there was a Gemara that was written in Bavel that was the main Gemara, and there's actually a Talmud Yerushalmi that was written in Jerusalem, in Yerushalayim. No need to know that. All we're going to be discussing is Talmud Bavli. When people say Gemara, this is what they mean. But look here on bottom. It says the Art Scroll series, the Horn edition of Seder Moed. Okay, so Horn family donated it, but you see it says Seder Moed. The Seder that it's in is Moed, because its Masechta is here, Masechtas Yuma. Yom means a day, I said before, and the holiest day of the year is referred to as Yuma, the day, and all halachas related to Yom Kippur will be found in that section. Okay, I actually went to a shul this morning to just make a copy of the, take a picture of what the Shas would look like laid out, the Gemaras. So this is actually, these are all Moed. I think that the last one on the right side is also, I believe, yes. Now, let me walk you through it. Over here in Hebrew, just I'm doing the spine of this book, is Talmud Bavli, the Talmud, the Gemara of Bavel, of Babylonia. Then here, let's do this one. Mesechtas Psachim here. Tractate Psachim in English. That means if you're looking for, and you do the same with Mishnayos, if you're looking for a Mishnah called Psachim, you say, oh, that belongs in the order, in the Seder of a Moed, and you would look up a Psachim. Because the proper translation of Gemara requires sometimes 3, 4, 5, 6 pages of translation for one page of Gemara, the Art Scroll Gemaras are much thicker, and there's much more heft to it. There's a lot more content than a regular Gemara would be. So have a look here. This is important. You see Psachim that has 1 dot, 2 dots, and 3 dots. That's Art Scroll's code for saying this is volume 1 of Psachim, this is volume 2, this is volume 3. Okay, so that's how you would look it up if it came to a Gemara. And what we're going to be doing today, now, is we're going to be finding a piece in Masechtas Yuma, so in Masechtas Yuma, which is part of Moed, and that also has 2 volumes. That has 2 volumes to it. Okay, if you want to look at even closer, this is, it's not really necessary. A lot of shuls, what they'll do, you'll see these numbers. If you go into a Beis Medrash and a shul and you want to find Svarim in the bookshelf, many shuls will have a very sophisticated code or simple codes of which books, in other words, all Chumash books and books on Chumash will have orange circles like that or tags. And so this here, I guess some of the tags fell off. You'll see many shuls will have markers to help guide you towards any books you might want. Okay, now let's go. Let's roll up our sleeves, and we're going to actually start learning a Mishnah. Now, here's how the pages look. This is Yuma. On the top here, it says the name of the Gemara, which is Yuma. It's the 3rd parak of Yuma, And the title of the title of the perek is called Amar Lahem Hamamuna, which you don't need to know the meaning of that. Usually, almost always, I think always perhaps, the name of the perek are the first couple of words that are in the perek itself. So the way Art Scroll did this, we're going to be, you see, I don't know if you can see it well enough. In the Gemara has running commentary. I told you with no nakudos, this mem saf nun there stands for masnisim, which means Mishnah. And you'll see a little bit later on, my cursor is down here. It actually finishes the Mishnah. The Mishnah is between these two red lines. And then we go back to Gemara, but there's no break. It just says Gimel Mem for Gemara. And on this side, there's a lot of getting used to Art Scroll's code for doing things. The commentary for Gemara on the English side, on the other page, is always 2 columns, and Mishnah goes across both columns. And you see how it says over there, Mishnah. And on the bottom, they have footnotes. So there's a lot of, getting to learn this real estate. If you're going to be doing this yourself or with your children, you definitely, I couldn't encourage you more strongly to learn it from an Art Scroll or other translation. So I want you to work your way to know your way around this page. Art Scroll also has a cute system because, like I said, all of this commentary, the translation of the Gemara, the translation of the Mishnah, and the footnotes all cover, you see this gray stripe here? You see that gray stripe? So, excuse me. So that gray stripe means that this is the first page of the translation, and that's found on this side. So this, in the corner there, it says 31b with a little number 1 there. That means it's you see here, it says Lamed Aleph Amud Beis. That's page 31 with 2 dots, means it's the second side. And here on the other side, it says 31b, but Art Scroll added a 1 because the commentary doesn't cover all of this page. In fact, I took a picture of the next page for you. You see the gray stripe slides down. So if you're looking, in other words, if you pick up an Art Scroll Gemara and there's no line, there's no gray bar where you're looking, you got to switch to a different page. So this would be where I made that red stripe there, that says 31b2. So it's the second page of English translation of this piece of Gemara. Okay, now here we go. Let's get rolling. This is the actual text of the Mishnah. And if you remember, I said at the beginning, one of the barriers is that we're talking about insider information, right? That everybody, people who really know Gemara know this stuff. But even if you translate it, if you got over the Nakudos barrier, by the way, here it's listed without Nakudos. If you, just for historical record, Rabbi Meir Zlotowitz, the head of Art Scroll, he was the visionary genius who did all of this. He was very, very close to Rabbi Moshe Feinstein and his son, Rab David. And one of the things they said is they wanted the Gemara printed in the Hebrews, in the Aramaic side. It should not have Nakudos. It should appear like a regular Gemara. If you look back to this here, so you say, well, what does it help me? If you look at this, here it is listed with Nakudos. So the translation here on top of the Gemara and the Mishnah all have Nakudos, punctuation, and so much more, which I'll get to now. Now, we're only going to do a few words, but of this Mishnah in Yuma. What I'm going to show you is how almost impossible it is to understand what's going on, even if you can translate the words. I call it a whisper. If you don't have somebody whispering in your ear, the translation, not the translation only, but the backstory. You need so much more because, as we'll see, look, I'll tell you exactly what it means. And let me just do just the regular translation. Pashat means he removed. Yarad is he went down. Yerida is to go down. V'taval, he toiveled. He went to toivel, it would seem to be in a mikveh, right? Tefillah, as you say, we went to toivel in a mikveh. Allah, he got up, doesn't say who it is yet. Vinistapek, and he dried himself. Heviulo, they brought to him big day zahav, his gold clothing. V'lavash, he got dressed. V'kidash yadav v'raglav, and he made holy his hands and his feet. So this is our body of learning for tonight. Okay, just these words. What does this mean? So, but once you get the backstory, you'll see that, it's learnable. You could learn it if somebody's whispering in your ear, gives you an introduction, which ArtScroll does a magnificent job of providing you with everything you need. So Pashat, so the backstory there's a number of backstories here. One of them is, this is talking about Yom Kippur and the Kohen Gadol. There were Kohanim, regular Kohanim, civilian Kohanim, and there was one Kohen Gadol, the head. It started with Aaron HaKohen. Moshe Rabbeinu's brother was the first Kohen Gadol. The regular civilian Kohanim, it was called a Kohen Hedyot, a regular Kohen, wore 4 articles of clothing, and there was no gold on it. So they had like a very large shirt that went down to the knees. They had a hat. They had a binder, like a gartel, a wrapping that went around their waist, and they had pants that like very long shorts that went past their knees. So that was worn by the regular Kohen. The Kohen Gadol had garments, 8 garments. Some of those extra ones were made out of gold. He had a breastplate of gold on his forehead. He had a choshen. He had whatever. There was gold in the Kohen Gadol's clothing. So another thing to know is that on Yom Kippur, the only one who did the avoda, the service, was the Kohen Gadol. During the year, they had mishmaros, they had shifts, so that everybody all Kohanim got a chance to work. But on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol had to do every single thing himself. Nobody was able to do any of the service of the day except for the Kohen Gadol. Now, we know sometimes when we have relationships with people we love, we have some sore subjects, right? That just, that we work our way through with God's help, but or not. But that we have some subjects that bring up poor memories. The egel, the golden calf, was made out of gold, and it was the biggest sin that the Jewish nation had done at that time. So again, it sounds simplistic, but there's a representation there. So the Kohen Gadol, when he did specific avoda, specific service that had to be for Yom Kippur only, he did not wear those extra 4 garments of gold, because when he's asking for tshuva, let's not bring up the whole gold thing to God. Now, of course, Hashem, you have to understand it on a deeper level, but that's what it says. Simply stated, that was the deal. So he wound up changing his clothing several times during the day as he transitioned from regular things that he did, that karbanos that were brought every day, and specialty items that were for Yom Kippur. Okay, every time the Kohen Gadol changed his clothing, he would go to the mikveh. They built him a mikveh very close to where the avodah was, so he shouldn't have to run around. And each time he changed, he toveled, he went to the mikveh, dried himself, put on the new clothing, and then he went, like we would wash our hands at the sink. There was a kiyar, and he washed his hands and his feet there. It was a water vessel in the Beis Hamikdash and in the Mishkan beforehand, and he would wash his hands after bathing before going back to the avodah. Now, let's go back now. So that's only background information. It's a lot, but if you know it, you know it. And I'll show you how ArtScroll perfectly lays it out for you. So Pashat, he took off this. So this Mishnah is talking about the Kohen Gadol when he first arrived in the Beis Hamikdash to start the avoda. So he was wearing his street clothing. He was wearing civilian clothing, not the clothing of the Kohen Hedyot, of the regular Kohen, the 4, and not the 8, not 4 plus 4, the priestly garments that only the Kohen Gadol wore. But so these were his street clothing. Pashat, he took off his clothing. Yarad, he went down the steps to the mikveh, the tavel, and he taveled himself. Allah, he got up, the nistapek, and he dried himself. Heviu lo, they brought to him bigdei zahav, his gold clothing, which means all 8. It means the regular ones plus the bigdei zahav. The lavash, he would put them on, and after he was dressed, by getting dressed, he would touch himself in private parts that are considered tamei. So v'kidash, and he would make holy yadav v'raglav, his hands and his feet. Okay, that's what the Mishnah says. So this Mishnah that seemed incomprehensible, with the back information, it's clear what happened. It's describing the first time he came to the Beis Hamikdash the morning of Yom Kippur. Now, one thing we would know, a hint would be, if you have somebody whispering in your ear, bigdei zahav means it's going to be an avoda that's not specific for Yom Kippur. If you look, we're not doing this now, but just to show you, heviu lo es hatamid, they brought him the carbon tamid. Tamid means constant. There were brackets, there were 2 carbonas that were brought every day. A tamid in the morning as the first carbon, and a tamid in the evening that was the last carbon. So this was a carbon that was used, that was done on a regular basis. So he would use his golden clothing, and he would take them off when he did his first avoda. So I'm going to show you some whispers, somebody whispering in your ear, to being able. First, I'm going to show you the slides that my Rebbe in the yeshiva, our 4th grade Rebbe, who started teaching Mishnayos, made this Masechtas Yuma, right? We know that Perik Gimel, 3rd Perik, Mishnah Daled. Now look what he has here. He made these 2 sheets, worksheets for his students, so that they would be able to have somebody whispering and they would be able to know it better. One thing that he made was a sheet that has real translation. You'll see he has a lot of similarities to the way ArtScroll did things. So here he says it stops. We started from Pashat, okay? So Pashat, he undressed the bigdei chol in parentheses. So now you'll see Rebbe puts these brackets and parentheses when it's not something that's a direct translation of the word. You'll see ArtScroll does the same thing. So Pashat, he took off, he undressed his bigdei chol, his weekday clothing. Yarad v'taval, literally it means went down and tovel. So he says he went down in parentheses to the mikveh and he did tefillah. You see on the side, it's tefillah number 1, the first time that day, because the Mishnah keeps a running count. Olav and Estapik, he came up and dried himself. Rebbe writes some reasons that he dried himself. The bigdei kuna might get ruined. The water, nothing was supposed to be between his garments. Hevi'u lo bigdei zav, the lavash, he put on his bigdei zav, and he kiddush yadav v'raglav. This here was like a stat sheet that he made without the translation. Pashat bigdei chol, his own bigdei chol, yarad v'tavel, where he toveled, and this is tefillah number 1. And lavash, this is really like a stat sheet. This is the first time that he put on his bigdei zav, and Rebbe used this to give the translation. This is the actual text that appears in ArtScroll's translation. Let's just go back and find it here, right? You see this here, right? It's on the left side of the page that you're looking at between the 2 lines, and right under it is the notes. So that I just made a larger version so you could see it. So here, the Mishnah continues. So this is a whisper, right? This is a whisper. The Mishnah is just, the ArtScroll translation here, the art scroll is giving us, whispering in our ear, what this is talking about. The Mishnah continues with its description of the Yom Kippur service. And here, by the way, you see it's left to right because it's primarily in English. You see the words are left to right. The Hebrew stays right to left, but the translation, in order not to make it cumbersome, goes left to right for Gemara and for Mishnah. Okay, Pashat Yarad V'Taval. Who, it doesn't say in the Mishnah, so the Kohen Gadol is in brackets. Now you see the dark font, the bold font, means it's a direct translation. Undressed, descended, and immersed, all are Pashat Yarad V'Taval. Here it says into the mikveh is in brackets. Olav and Estapik, he ascended and tried himself. Hevielo Big Dezav, they brought him the golden vestments. Here, all 8 vestments, meaning the regular ones plus the extra 4, and he donned them, he put them on. You see, even precisely, look at this. It says there, Vilavash. Look over here in the line above. He donned them. Really, lavash doesn't mean them. Lavash means dressed. So again, it's just reinforcing. If you want to know the translation of the words, look for only the bold ones. V'kidash yadav raglav, and he sanctified his hands and feet. You see these footnotes? I'll show you them in a moment. That's it. We stop there. Now look at this footnote number 6. Right? He sanctified his hands and feet. He used the kior for this, that was the vessel for the sanctification, and he gives a reference. Rashi, see this Tosfos, see Yitzchak, if you want to look up more. And here, the Gemara below will explain that for each change of vestments, the Kohen Gadol sanctified his hands and feet twice. Once when he removed the first set, and when he donned, first time in the morning, he didn't take it off, so he didn't need to go over that. Okay, so we're almost done for today's learning. Here you can see another note that our scroll helps us out with. This is actually before the actual Gemara starts here, but it says here, look, normally the Kohen Gadol serves in his 8 special vestments, which include 4 made out of gold, breastplate, Kohen Gadol. However, on Yom Kippur, he performed the special services wearing only 4 entirely of linen. A linen sheet was used to shield him when changing, and that reminded him that it was a special service. Tosfos say why, whatever. There's so much on top of this. Let's just finish up some things that I wanted to show you. This art scroll has a very large introduction at the beginning of the Masechta, of the tractate, and sometimes for the Perek itself, it might even have 5-6 pages of all the background information, and I strongly advise you to look through them. Look on top here. It says here, general information, Masechtas Yoma. This is at the beginning. The word Yoma, Aramaic for the day, refers to Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And then, okay, and then if you look later, I think it was here, at midnight, look, at daybreak, I'm up on the top left here. They would spread a linen sheet between the Kohen Gadol and the spectators. He would remove his personal clothing. Okay, so this really gives you, I made this slide. There we go. At daybreak, you can see how he, what we learned about. And here it's Mishnah. It shows you where it's referenced. These are 3 Mishnayos. This here is page 28, Daf Chav Ches, Amud Aleph, side 1, page 30, side 1, and page 31, B. And then, there's even a picture there. I took this from Art Scroll. This is a whole diagram of the second temple, the second Beis HaMikdash, to show you exactly where a lot of these places are. Now we're actually going to delve into Gemara. What we're going to do is, we're going to do these logical components, and then we're going to get to the Gemara, which says Matzah Peres Mufuzaran, which pulls some words from the actual Mishnah itself. Okay, let's go back to the beginning now. And let me show you another stroke of genius of Rabbi Spivak. Here's the conversation. David asked his brother Chaim, do you know what mommy's making for supper? Chaim answers, we're having hamburgers. I know this because I saw mommy take some ground beef out of the freezer this morning. Well, said David, that doesn't mean anything. Maybe we're having meatballs. Chaim ended all doubt when he said, that's true, but she also went to the store and bought hamburger buns. This is a logical dialogue. By the way, you have mathematical logic like this. You have proofs in geometry work like this, where you want to bring proof. Any law arguments, work like this, right? The prosecutor says the defendant did this because we saw blood on his knife. He said, maybe he was, maybe he was defending himself earlier in the evening against someone else, right? So exactly, Michelle. So this is, I just think, the rule in education, and this is where I see sometimes, kids start falling apart in Gemara. The rule in education is you only teach one thing at a time. Meaning when you're teaching a skill, because we're going to be going into Gemara and talking about lost objects, it's if we try to teach this, meaning the logical steps, while we're teaching an actual piece of Gemara, lots of folks in the field of education would say that that's not a recipe for success. You're much more likely to lose. We rather practice on this and learn the skills of how this goes. So let's break this down. So right here, Rebbe says, look at this, follow the cursor. Please look at the above story and the same 5 steps in the paragraph right before it. Write the words of the story that show each of the 5 steps. So she'ela, by the way, a lot of times you'll hear people who know how to learn even, not necessarily using the precise words for this. So very often you'll hear the term kasha as a question. So a she'ela is a request for information. If I ask you, what time is it? That's a she'ela, it's not a kasha. If I ask you, why are you wearing a sweater outside? Yesterday it was much colder and you didn't wear a sweater. Why are you wearing a sweater today? That's a kasha, that I'm asking something on the action that you did. A she'ela is a request for information. They're different things, and we categorize them differently in our Gemara. We only have 8 logical steps that we identified. So the she'ela here would be, do you know what mommy's making for supper? Chaim answers, that's a teretz. Parenthetically, you see the punctuation here. It says teretz. Very often people don't pronounce, in the vernacular, it's not always exactly the way you see the punctuation, just putting it out there. Okay, so don't get bent out of shape, or don't get upset or frustrated if you see, maybe I didn't pronounce this right. Many times, I'm not even going to go into the history, but for some reasons, sometimes the precise pronunciation is not used. So here we go. So Chaim answers a teretz. I'm going to use yeshiva speak, not the punctuation, okay? So he answers, we're having hamburgers. Now, the next part is his proof. I know this because is a raya. So David pushes away his raya and says, that's not a good proof, right? Because maybe we're having meatballs. So Chaim said, oh, I'll bring you a better proof. I saw her defrosting the meat, which he said earlier, but now I saw her bringing hamburger buns. So that's really a valid raya. And you see in the questions on the bottom, these are review questions. You'll see there's an enormous amount of review tools that we have in our Gemara. So so here we have, look at this. As we learned in lesson 6, Gemara is made up of discussions. Now we're going to learn more about it. So a sugya is shakla v'tarya. These are translation words. I'm not even going to bother with this because you have an English translated Gemara in Mishnah, and you don't even, I told you at the beginning, don't even bother with translation or punctuation right now. So in the children have in their workbooks, in this workbook, there are Aramaic or Gemara word translations in order of appearance. So we have 8 steps. The first is a statement. So let's just keep it simple. By the way, look at the icon is also memra, a statement like a bubble, like a quote bubble. So memra is a simple statement. Akasha is a question that you say that doesn't seem to be correct. Not a she'elas bir, right? This is a kasha. A teretz is an answer that we defend the original statement. A raya is a proof, like he just had here with the meatballs that he brought a proof. First proof was refuted, which is a dechia, right? You have that the icon of the hand, pushing off that rejects a proof. She'ela is a question requesting information. A tshuva is a response to a she'ela. So when he said, "What's mommy serving?" is a she'ela, so that Rebbe wrote teretz. I'll leave that for a different time, but that would be an answer for a request for information. And finally, we have maskana, which has the gavel, a judge's gavel, that knocks down the ruling, and we come with a final verdict, a final psak in halacha. And many times in the real Gemara, as Gemara goes along, you'll reach a conclusion. Someone may come with a question, but generally when the Gemara ends a discussion, and this is the object of Gemara is to clarify the Mishnah, to offer interpretation, perhaps give some color to the canvas of precisely what they were talking about. One example is this first piece of Gemara that I'll be teaching you. Okay, so this is actually Sugya Aleph. This is what the Gemara starts with. Okay, and these are shiurim 1 Aleph through Vav. In our book, we divide them up into shiurim. But this is how the Gemara starts itself. Okay, now in the Mishnah said these words right over here. You see these words in green? That's a memra. Again, that's a statement. The Mishnah said, I did not bring the Mishnah in here because I didn't want to add information, but for the purpose of this discussion, the Mishnah talks about the parak. Here, look at this. This parak Sheni is the second parak in Masechta Baba Metzia, and Elu Metzias is the name of the parak. And if you remember, I told you in the previous talk we did that generally speaking, the name of the parak is the first couple of words in the parak. So the Mishnah says, Elu Metzias Shalai, these are, Metzia means something that's found. In Yiddish, by the way, a bargain is called a Metzia. You may have heard that from your grandmother. I got a Metzia today. So that's the same idea. I found something. I got this great find. I got something for a lower price. So the Mishnah says, Elu Metzias Shalai, these are the types of found objects that a finder is allowed to keep. The Elu, and these, Chayev Lahachriz, he has to announce. The rule is that if something, the overall governing principle of that Mishnah, is that there are some objects that the finder can keep it, primarily because the owner would give up hope of finding it, or it's not worth his bother, his investment of time. So if there's a couple of pennies in the street, let's say, and it looks like it fell out and nobody's coming back for it, he would be allowed to keep it. If somebody stacked a few coins, for example, in a corner in a public domain, that would mean that he left it there and hopes to get it back. So the Mishnah gives a number of examples of things that you could keep. Okay, so here's what the Mishnah says. So the Mishnah says, Matzah Peres Mefuzaran, if, you see, here we go, see the same type of translation you saw in ArtScroll and in Rabbi Lowy's sheets, that if isn't there, matzah is just he found. So if he found scattered produce, he may keep it. That's what the Mishnah says. Okay, the first halacha, I'm reading from the Rabbi Spivak's notes. The first halacha that the Mishnah taught is one who finds scattered produce may keep it. The Gemara is now ready to discuss this halacha. So because the Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi wrote the Mishnah in concise terms, so very often this is a good example of what Gemara would discuss. So the Gemara asks a she'ela, step number 2. You see the steps are noted because later on, I'll show you in some of the homework sheets, there's a lot of emphasis on maintaining the bouncing ball, following the steps of the Gemara to really maintain clarity. So the Mishnah, the Gemara asks a she'ela in order to clarify the memra. So v'kama, and how much, here's the parentheses, you see, does it have to be scattered in order for the owner to be able to keep it? So it's scattered. What does scattered mean? Is it a little bit scattered? Is it very scattered? Is it just like, anybody's call? Is there a precise measure of it? So that's what the Gemara was asking this question. The Meimer came from the Mishnah. In other words, they were reading from the Mishnah. The Mishnah says matzah peres mufuzaran. So someone asked v'kama, and how much is that? I'm not going to read the text. You can look through it yourself if you'd like to. But I'm just giving you a sample and a flavor of what Gemara would look like. So this is the question. So what does it mean scattered? Does it mean like this? Does it mean like this? Or does it mean like this? Which one? V'kama, that's the question. V'kama, how much is it? So the Gemara answers, this is a tshuva. This is step number 3. So the tshuva is Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, that Rosh Tevis, that Aleph apostrophe Resh is Amar Rebbe. There are some acronyms that are represented in Gemara. If you didn't have enough to remember or learn, see now you could read through the text, but I'm just going to leave it like this. Okay, so Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak says kav. If there is one kav, an amount of produce, an amount of grain, ba'arba amos, in a square. So again, here you have all the brackets here, spread out in an area of 4 amos by 4 amos. So if you have a kav, by the way, that's an accurate representation of a kav. That's Rabbi Spivak's hand. It's just and it's a regular Coca-Cola bottle with the top cut off. So it's another thing to give children, learners, adults, a feel for what that's like. Okay. My Rebbeim actually would go out in the yard and measure off amos, and you'll see actually a picture here. So all of this helps retention of memory. So this is called an amma. An amma is measured from a person's elbow, an average height of a person from the elbow to the tip of their middle finger. So this is 1 amma. So 4 amos, by 4 amos, this would be a square. If that Coca-Cola bottle was spread over filled with grain, was spread over this space, that would be an amount that a person would be allowed to keep. Again, the question was, it says matzah peres mufuzaran, you can keep it. How spread out does it have to be? And the answer is kav ba'arba amos, 1 kav in 4 amos. Okay. Now, this is, okay, the sugya at this point, Shiurim Aleph and Beis, and these are a lot of different tools for review that we use. One of them is number the steps. You'll see this throughout the book. And by the way, your kids in school might not do these exercises, and they might get really annoyed if you start doing it with them because you want them to really understand it. And you'll say, but you don't really understand. They're going to say, we're not responsible for it. Okay? And just leave it then. So matzah peres mufuzaran. This is a Gemara. So the question is, when do these steps end? So before matzah, we would put a number 1, matzah peres mufuzaran, period. The kama gets a 2 right here before the word kama. And Amar Rabbi Yitzchak is already 3. This is unusual that you have 3 steps in just a few words. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak kav ba'arba amos, period. So that would be 1, 2, 3. That's how it would appear in the order of question and answer. And again, this is very helpful because it really helps the learners solidify in their minds how to delineate specifically between the steps. This is a vocabulary review, and this is a label and summarize the same idea here. This is in steps. These icons and 8 possible logical components. In those 8 components, that's all we write here. So here, step 1 is memra, a statement. What does it say? And you write it in your own words in English. If someone finds scattered produce, they can keep it. Step 2, right, would be a she'ela, v'kama. How much? How much does it have to be spread out? And step 3 is an answer to that, which says 1 kav in 4 amos. Okay? That's it.